Stan, you've told us about your life history more or less, but we haven't heard much about your life in local politics. Now, when did you first get involved in local events or local affairs?
Well, local affairs, it was a long story. During the war, we had a very active youth centre in Coventry, and in 1943, 44, I was very active in the youth centre, serving on the committee, and we had an organisation there for making model aircraft, and I used to keep an eye on that. So when they had War Weapons Week, I was invited to sit on with the parish council to represent youth on the War Weapons Week committee, and that was where I finally started and got an appetite, if you like, for.
How old were you then?
I would be about 16 at that time, and I just then, and I'd been involved with the Army Cadets. I was Company Sergeant Major of the Coggeshall Company, and so I'd been attending a few meetings. Then I went into forces, of course, and when I come out, like a lot of young people, who were very idealistic about things, and there wasn't much going on in Coggeshall at the time.
But going back to when you were a boy and you're 16-year-old, during the war years, were there any particular problems with the parish, do you know, which you were aware of? I mean,
not that I was aware of, no, we weren't aware of any problems there. I mean, parish government in Coggeshall at that time was left to a selected few. That was a case of the rich man in his castle, the poor man at the gate, really.
I see,
And
any idea who the chairman was then?
The chairman, I think the chairman at that time was Mr. Peel, John Peel, who used to be the manager at the Hollins factory. He was the chair at the time. He was a nice man, John Peel was, and he was the committee, the War Weapons Week committee I was on. He was chairing that, and you know, he gave me the youth point of view. He gave me the head a bit, you know.
Have you any idea what their responsibilities were at all, roughly at that time?
What, the parish council? Well, the parish council, at that time, the local government, there had been two principal acts, the 1894 Act, which founded parish council, and then that was modified by the 1933 Act, and that within the scope of those two acts, that was a very limited activities that the parish council could engage in. The 1933 Act, that opened it up a little bit. And that, but
what sort of things, do you know? Can you recall?
Well, today, the parish council have now got much more power than they had. But the 1933 Act, they limit, there was a series of funny things that they could, in fact, one which might sound a bit ridiculous was they could spend money on a public bathhouse and things like little things like that. That was quite a lot that they could do, but it was very constrictive on what they spent. I mean, when you look at it, at that time, the precept, that's the money we get from the district council and the parish. I was looking up only the other day, my first precept that I saw when I first went on in 1952 was £755 for the year, and today when I came off, I think it was about something like about 120,000. So that shows how expenditure has gone up in that time.
That was interesting.
The clerk of the day, who was first one was Cliff Rutland, and then he was then we had Norman Byrne. Mainly the clerks all came from Bowman's office, which later became Bowman Sands, and they were all sort of clerks within the office, and they came from there.
Did they get any fee at all for their work?
The Cliff Rutland, when I went on, he was paid £32 a year. I mean, today we're paying near enough 20,000 for a clerk. So that was a more labour of love in that. But the clerks were very, very good, and not only did they get a very small wage, or honorarium, I suppose, a better term, but they had to operate from the house, their own houses, provide all their accommodation. You know, there was no such thing as printers and that sort of thing, and photocopies. You know, that was out of it. I mean, most of it was typed in carbon. I mean, I've got some agendas upstairs going back to my early days when Norman Burton has obviously made carbon copies of it, typed them out and made carbon copies. Well, the parish council at that time consisted of 11 representatives, or 11th representatives at that time. It went up to 13 later on, but 11th representative. So he had to, if he'd got to type 11 copies of it out, you know, obviously he'd got to resort to something, you know. There was they used to use some of the facilities at Beaumont's office, and that there was some not duplicate. Well, it was duplicating, and that it was mainly duplicating on the old Romeo drum type duplicator, and that. And of course, then when Percy Firth came along, that was Percy's business, and of course Percy then became the clerk for a time. And
are we still talking about before the war?
No. I've jumped the gun a bit. But yeah, but before, I was going back to before the war, and to put it in perspective, you know, they did very, very little. And I mean, the biggest thing what happened, that was long before my time. We're going back to about 1912, and that if you read the history of that, of a sorry state of how piped water came to Cockerhill. It took them 11 years to agree to bring piped water into Cockerhill. There was a school of thought which said that there's plenty of springs in Cockerhill. Let's get them. In fact, they employed a consultant to see where they could draw enough water from springs instead of having a pipe supply. And they went to all kinds of subterfuge not to do it. And it was a sorry state how they did it. I mean, some of the observations that I read and looking it up was, you know, that why should we give them water? They'll want sewers next, you know. and this was Cockerhill up until about, I'll go back to 1912 time then, before they got round to doing it, you know.
Did they? Is that when the pump went in St Peter's Road, or
no,
the reservoir?
The pump went into St Peter's Road. That went in, yes, that went about 1912, 1913 time, that went in. There were two firms of consultants employed to come up with a scheme, and they did come up with a scheme, and the one had a pump house in St Peter's Road, or Dead Lanes that was called then, in St Peter's Road, and a reservoir on the Earlstown Road. That was in their original proposal. That laid on the table for 2 or 3 years before they took it up and ran with it. But they finally ran with it, and Cockerhill eventually got piped water. But there was a funny thing about, they were reluctant to bring water into Tilkey.
Oh.
And so one of the press reports I read about it was that there was quite an active Tilkey man fighting the corner for Thames with a chap called Jonathan Cook. I remember him when I was a boy, and Jonathan was fighting the cause, and one of the other people on the council said, well, we should have to do something about Tilkey, the working man's suburb, and that was the way they looked at Tilkey. But they were both unprogressive about it at that time. And of course, there were two parishes then. There was Little Cockerhill and Great Cockerhill.
Oh yes, of course.
Little Cockerhill didn't come into the fold until about 1947.
Yes.
And they had the two parishes.
I suppose there was a separate council and clerk for the Little Cockerhill.
There was, oh yes, they were, and they were very, very independent. The Little Cockerhill Council was independent, and there wasn't a lot of harmony between them and Great Cockerhill. Yes. For example, in this side row of the water, it was brought about that the drainage system that was so inadequate, and that used to flow into the back ditch at the bottom of Bridge Street. Yes. And so, having got the water there, there were terrible smells, and people couldn't sort of live with these smells, although they had to. But there was a lot of smell and not a complaint, a lot of disease. There was a very forward-looking doctor here at the time, and that was when some of the old-fashioned diseases were about, you know, diphtheria, scarlet fever, which you don't hear about these days. They were about, and they were put down to the state of the back ditch. Well, the argument with the back ditch was that they were told that someone had got a county health official come down and he issued an ultimatum. The ditch had got to be cleared and tidied up. But that went on for 2 or 3 years because the proportion that little coppers have got to pay and great coppers, they couldn't agree. And this went on. That further held up development. But I think that looking at what I've read about little cockers is that the most the strange thing which suggests how eccentric they were. During the war there was tank traps about the town. There was one set outside the church, there was one at the bottom of Grange Hill. And the tank trap consisted of a glazed pipes in the road, and they used to drop all sections of railway line in them. And the one at the bottom of Grange Hill, they thought, the Little Coggeshall Parish Council thought what a terrible inconvenience it was. So the rest of the country were sort of worried about being invaded and all that sort of thing, but they had the cheek to write to the War Office and asked if that could be moved because that was an inconvenience to them. But this was the type of people you got for Little Coggeshall. Well, and one thing that looks queer thing about Little Coggeshall, the Local Government Act of '33 clearly stated that no parish council meeting should be held in a public house. Oh. But they all used to meet in a pub. Yes, they held their meeting in a pub, and that was a peculiarity that they got. But like I say, this state of affairs went on until 1947 when they finally merged the parish and became Coggeshall we are today.
Anyway, the wars come along when you go, and eventually do some military service. You came back.
Yeah.
What, did you get involved immediately after you came back from
not
service?
immediately. I felt I'd like to,
yes.
And what I used to do, and I did this for about a couple of years, I used to attend the parish council meetings as a visitor. When I first went, there was me and Alan Hull were the two of us. We used to go together, and when we first met, we were looked at weren't very welcome, really, and to have somebody intrude on their deliberations, that wasn't.
They didn't like the public there.
No, they didn't want the public to be there. No fear. And so they eventually they accepted it. We went. There's one or two enlightened people on there. I mean, I clearly remember Mrs. Everard, who used to live down the Abbey, and Mrs. Todd, and they welcomed us. But some of the others there, certainly the chairman, Mr. Goodwin,
Who was the chairman?
Mr. Goodwin.
Oh, yes.
Well, Mr. Val Goodman.
Yes.
He wasn't at all in favour of us. They weren't at all. Today we give them copies of the agenda, we give them copies of the minute, and make them further company. And we're pleased to see them. But that hand of friendship wasn't held out. At the same time, by a queer quirk that I just met my future wife Joan, and we decided to go to, or Joan decided to go to do a needlework course at the technical college night school with that. Well, I was just getting on. I'd been put on the staff at work. And I was looking for something where I could advance myself. So they would run the course for the Institute of Chartered Secretaries on company law and procedure at meetings. Well, I felt that was a good thing. So I did a year down there. I didn't take any examinations. I studied down there for a year on this, and I got a great insight on how to conduct meetings and the laws and the rules and regulation of meetings, and that. So that done me a bit of good. So in 1952, when the election came, there was myself, Alan Hull, Geoffrey Blackwell and John Alston. We decided to stand for the parish council as younger members. One of the things at that time, looking back, Coggeshall wasn't very progressive. I mean, the recreation ground wasn't cut as we know it today. It was allowed to grow and it was cut so they could sell the hay. And there would be nothing to go down the recreation field. They would find hay cocks all over the place, so you couldn't play football. And the same happened with the cemetery. That was allowed to grow for hay, and they sold the the hay, the cutting of the hay was sold.
And who had the benefit from that?
Well, I don't know who had the recreation one, but I do know Mr. Prentice. He used to farm at Fabian's Farm,
oh yes,
which is on the corner of the Girton Road now, where it used to be,
yes.
and he used to do it for the hay, and we didn't think that was right. You know, that wasn't at all unprogressive. Fluorescent lighting, fluorescent street lighting and sodium lighting was in its infancy, was coming in. Coggeshall was lit by a number of old tungsten bulb lanterns with a 16-watt bulb in. In fact, people used to say they're not much better than the gas lamp, and they had been installed for a number of years, and they were very rusty and one thing or another. And we thought, well, you know, new estates were just starting to be built.
Oh yes,
and they were going up, and at that time the parish council, well, it still is today, but it doesn't do so much, was a street lighting authority. And every time a new estate was built, the developer had to put the lights in, but he had to approach the parish council and say how many lights you want, and what type. So us youngsters, I say youngsters, I was about 24, 25, we decided that okay, we would have a policy now, and of changing the street lights over. Any new building Coggeshall would have the up-to-date lights on the market. Well, we did that. There was a little bit of doubt about it. That wasn't warmly received, but and it wasn't applauded because they cost us a little bit more to run, you know, and so. But however, that was how we started, and we developed a plan. I've got a copy of it upstairs of where we worked towards this, because eventually we decided, well, okay, the lights that we owned had got to be changed, and we had to go. That was going to cost £2,000 to change the final ones, and at that time it was part of the Local Government Act. You could, to spend that amount, you had to have a public meeting and get the full views of the parish on it. Well, the public meetings were some were attended and some weren't. But if we was proposed to spend any money, you got a little bit of opposition. We certainly got some opposition for that, but in the end they passed it, and so.
How many was on the parish council at the time?
Well, at that time we started them. We were coming up to 13 then.
Yes. Yeah. And how many youngsters were on it?
Well, the youngsters of the youngsters, I would say there was 5 of us. Yeah.
So there was still the old guard there.
Oh, the old guard went. The old guard went because they were changed. I mean, Mr. Goodman. I mean, I'm not knocking Mr. Goodman. He done a lot of jolly good work for Coggeshall in other ways, but he was so disgusted at us younger people that on one occasion he was elected chairman. That didn't help. George Potter was elected chairman. George was a much respected non-conformist and that, an elderly man, but he was elected chairman, and had a discuss. Mr. Goodman got up and walked out and that sort of thing. But we were very much supported by Mrs. Everard and Mrs. Todd. They used to say, how refreshing it is to see you young men here, you know that. And so we plodded along like that, but mostly if you look at it, what was going on, it's very cyclic. A lot of the problems that we've got today were on the first agendas. I have found out, I've looked up in my files, and I've got 1 or 2 of my agendas go back to 1952, and if you put them with the present day agenda, a lot of the items are still there. But one big item that we were fighting for all the while was public toilets. And that went on the agenda in about, I think about 1954, 55, and that was on every agenda right up until they were actually built. And that, which would be, I think, in the early 60s, before we finally got it. There was every excuse made, well, we shouldn't have a public toilet in Coggeshall, and mainly the Rural District Council. I mean, the Rural District Council wasn't the most progressive of councils to work with. I mean, even the old parish council, the old state has gone back to the 1910, 1912 time. They had problems working with the district council. So much so, I should have mentioned this probably earlier, that in 1910 they applied to give urban status for Coggeshall.
Oh,
yes, but they'd worked it out. It would be far cheaper to get the water on if we were an urban council rather than a parish council. So they actually applied for urban status. But when you read the figures, that was laughable, really, the way they were going to tackle it, because they said, we've got to have a surveyor, so we can employ one of them for £30 a year, and we need a medical officer. Well, it'll cost about £35, and we can get a clerk job quite cheaply. No effect, no effort, no budget that was put in for the clerk. We get a clerk job quite cheaply, but fortunately that was turned down. That didn't go forward. There was at that time, in fairness to them, there were one or two of the other people were getting those. They used to quote, I think Wivenhoe had got it, you know, and they used to look on Wivenhoe as being as a achieved urban state, and they were making a little bit of money on it. That wasn't costing them so much to run. So
immediately after the war, of course, they start building new council houses.
Yes.
Was there much conflict with that at all from the parish at all?
Not at all, no. They welcomed it, really. I mean, a lot of it was, there hadn't been any sort of clearing of the old buildings and that sort of thing. Up to, it's around about 39 time, before the war, there had been some efforts made. I mean, Hill Road, Mount Road, were the principal ones. And we'd had the council house. I mean, in 33 time, there was the ones at Tilkey Road, and there were a few up at the Hamlet were built and that sort of thing. But there'd been no great developments, and it wasn't the first one that they went for was Monkdowns Road, which was quite a thing at the time. I mean, we were a new road with modern lighting, albeit they were area houses, they were prefabricated type of house. But at least that was a start, you know, and that meant a hell of a lot. But there were people, I mean, when you look at the housing situation at that time, there were people living at Marks Hall in old huts on the airfield. In fact, to some respect, you could blame the demise of Marks Hall House to that period. And so they had a lot of people to rehouse. And a lot of people had come back from the war, married and that sort of thing.
So I suppose the population of Coggeshall went up?
It went up very marginally. It was very slow going up. The population at that time was about 2,000, I suppose.
This is what?
About 2,000.
What year would that be?
I'm going back to the 50s. And it went up very, 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 very slow. We'd had an influx of new people. But also we'd had people go out during the war. Some had been and found girls away and married and went, but some of the local girls had married, you know, and that sort of thing. So that was fairly static, I suppose. But Monkdowns Road set the seal of
of course, the town was fortunate; it didn't have much sort of residential damage, did it, during the war?
No,
not like some towns.
No, the big problem they had to address really was housing neglect. When I say housing neglect, I have to be careful to call them slums, because I used that term at a meeting once, and I was chastised heavily for it, and half of college have stopped speaking to me for a day or two till they forgot it. That was a 9-day wonder. But no, they weren't actually slum houses, but they were houses were in a poor standard. You know, the Housing Act, I think, was it the Housing Act of 1921 had come in, and that for the first time set standards on housing and that, where they've got to have a pantry, they've got to have running water inside the house, and that certain ventilations in the room, which they hadn't got, opening windows, and that they hadn't, and so that set down a new standard just of that time of house. They were slow filtering through, but they had filtered through, and a lot of houses, there'd been a lot of houses had been done up just prior to the war. But there'd been some which were beyond redemption, and so that was a question of replacing those type of houses and that went on there.
Of course, at this time, post-war, you were working at Crittles.
Yes, yeah. when I came out, I took a temporary job at Crickles, which stretched out and it lasted 47 years. But I was working there, you know, and that was it. Then I mean, employment was a different thing. I mean, at that time there was always two double-decker buses used to go every morning to Wickham, full of people to Crickles factory at Wickham, and another double-decker bus used to go to Braintree. And then when I came on the staff, I used to go there 8:30. That used to be full of Crickles workers going to Braintree then. So you know, there were a lot of commuting outside the town to work.
Of course, a lot of the community were involved in farm work, weren't they?
Oh, yes,
there were a lot of farms.
Farming was much bigger then than it is now. I mean, I think somebody was telling me that, for example, the Gatehouse Farm here across here. They employed at one time about 29 people, and now I think they employ 2 or 3. So that shows the difference in it, you know. And of course, farming had been in a slump in the 30s. That was the war that brought them back again, and that was when we had a couple of Scotch farmers came who bought land quite cheaply here. They were encouraged to come and buy land. You had Mr. Fairley, who took Stock Street Farm, and Mr. Bell, who took a lot of the Marks All estates. They came in, but it wasn't too intensive, labour intensive there. Kings, of course, the 2 Kings were in their heyday, and they were large employers. Did
they have any influence on the parish council at all, or did you?
No. That was completely negative. But you know, in the early days, E.W. King had been a great man for the parish. He'd been a very forward-looking man, and he was different. Apparently, if you read the history books, John Kay wasn't too keen on doing anything, but E.W. King was very public spirited, and he did a lot. Reading back what went on at that time, it seems to me that he was a very forward-looking chap amongst and otherwise dull band.
Now, anyway, you're on the parish council, you know, bringing new, fresh ideas. Now, when did you become chairman for the first time? Was that some years ahead?
No. I was on for 3 years. Then I wasn't elected by 4 votes for the second 3. So I had a 3-year spell off, and then I came on again. The next time I topped the poll, and I came on, and against some opposition, I was appointed chairman at that first meeting. So and that was when it went on.
What year was that? Any idea?
That would be 52, 55.
55.
Yeah, hold on, 52, 55. That'd be 58.
58.
58 then, yeah. When I got on again, and you know, I held the chair down pretty well. I'm quite proud of my achievement. On the first spell, I was on there. I think I was nearly 20 years, and I never missed a parish council meeting. And I was very keen, too keen for my own good. Bearing in mind I've got a young family.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I have flown home from Glasgow to attend the meeting of Coggeshall Parish Council for a period of time. When Glasgow Airport was being built, Crickles were responsible for the cladding and the windows and particularly the fingers where the aircraft used to unload, and it was going way behind, and the architect couldn't make sense, and I was a draftsman at the time, so I was asked to go up to Glasgow every so often to pick up details straight from the drawing board and bring them back to Brain and work on them. But I have been up there. I had been up on day trips when I've left home in Coggeshall before 5, drove to Heathrow. It was Heathrow then, and then up to Glasgow, flew up to Glasgow, done a day's business, left Glasgow about 4 and come home and hadn't bothered with any tea. I've just been my council meeting. Joan would see me about 9:30 when the meeting finished. But you know, that was I can honestly say without boasting,
You weren't able to claim expenses like we do today.
Oh no. I could honestly say, hand on heart, that I never claimed a halfpenny in expenses. Calf bench and telephone, I didn't claim a halfpenny. In fact, a few years ago, when there was the government was encouraging for parish council to be paid, the Coggeshall Parish Council were all against it, and I firmly said that rather than receive payment, I will resign. I didn't agree with it. I'm a firm believer. I'm a bit old-fashioned, really. That if you take something out of life, it's like farming. You've got to put something back, and that was what I put back. My love for Coggeshall really drove me in that. But it sort of what kept me going, I suppose, on it. But I was getting on. But towards the end of the first period, I was also my career was advancing, and I was going to night school and that, and then the company had put me on a sort of a management training limb, and so I could see that okay, I'd got some sort of a career ahead of me and that. So that was the reason I came off on the first time, to give it a rest. Because then of course I went to Nigeria for 5 years,
and we're doing your first period there. Have you any, to your mind, any noticeable achievement? In that first period?
Well,
I know you haven't a great deal of control.
No. But the thing, I mean, the first year it was. I mean, we got the recreation ground, for example. I mean, that had been quite badly neglected, and that, especially with the grass cutting, we got all the grass under contract for the first time, and I mean, that time there wasn't too many people. Now you see people with gang mowers all over the place. Yes, but we had to get a chap come from Felsted with a blooming great tractor to do it. But we found a contractor and we did that. So we got that, and we got the cemetery licked into place as a thing.
Is the parish responsible for the cemetery?
Yes, yes, the parish is responsible for the cemetery. And part way in there, we had to take over the churchyard surrounding the. I at first resisted that, because it was going to be a burden on the precept. And the Reverend Davy was the vicar of the day, a wonderful man who I got on very, very well with. His church wardens was Mr. Curtis, the schoolmaster, headmaster, and Wilfred Turner, three wonderful men. But Wilfred had seen that we'd got a closed churchyard, closed it by order of Queen Victoria, and so a closed they could have the parochial church council could apply to the parish council to take over and maintain the churchyard. Well, we resisted doing that at the time, as I say, but in the end we gave in. We didn't have any option really. Didn't got to give in, and we took it over, and that was quite a move forward in a way, because.
You did mention about tennis courts. I know that.
Oh yeah, tennis courts. That was another problem we had. That was.
Where were they?
They never materialised. There was a couple lived in Coggeshall in top of Grange Hill, and
something Abbey Lane, was there?
Yeah, Abbey Lane. That's right. There was it was Ken Crisp and his wife. Well, Mrs. Crisp was keen on tennis and formed a Coggeshall Tennis Club. Ken was keen on cricket, and he wanted to move the cricket pitch. But the biggest bone of contention was the tennis courts. Well, this was during John was secretary, was chairman at that time. I was vice chair, and they wanted to put them on the recreation ground. Well, not many people know this, but it's not common knowledge that the whole recreation ground was a part of the war memorial for the First World War. And there are one or two restrictive covenants on it, and they said that there should be no enclosed space on it, on the recreation ground. Well, of course, the tennis club, they wanted to have a dedicated court, and they wanted a public court, and they also wanted a small building for changing facilities. And so some of us on the council went ahead with it and agreed with it and said, yes, okay, we'll look into it. And we looked into it, and it was quite feasible. But there were other elements, not only on the council but outside, who were really very much against it. And there was terrible arguments. I mean, if all the time I was on the council, I've never heard people swear at a council meeting. I mean, certainly if I was in the chair, but I would rule them out of order and ask them to leave. But it got so that people were swearing at the chairman and that over this, and in the end, someone clubbed together and they appointed a barrister, and so they had a ruling on this thing from the barrister, and the barrister ruled against the council. A tennis court was an enclosure, and so we had to back down, and there was no tennis courts on recreation ground. But that was a catalyst, because the schools courts weren't used at that time. The Honeywood schools courts weren't used at that time. But all fairness to the school, they'd just become a community school, and they said, well, let them come and use our courts. They didn't do it. They made excuses why they shouldn't, but they did. But the courts were made available over in the Honeywood school to the public. So there was a little bit of good come out of it, but a very acrimonious. And that caused John.
So they were never built on the recreational ground.
No, that caused John Barfield. That caused him to. In the end, he finished his year, and he didn't take it on anymore with the chair. So I
don't know if during your time there was that trouble about the access to the river on the Grange Hill. You know, the slipway.
Yes. Yeah.
Was that during your time?
Well, that was much later.
Much later.
That was much later in my time. There was problems with it because the estate.
Mr. Stedman wanted to.
Mr. Stedman.
Tried to.
Now, that land in front of the old barn was common land, and so if you went to the land register at the time, you could register this land and assume ownership.
No.
Mr. Stedman was a past master doing this. I understood he'd done it elsewhere, and he came to Coggeshall and done that. Well, Coggeshall people didn't like that too much, and there was quite an argument about this land. And Mr. Soames Gardner, who lived in Monkwell, he was very much against it, as indeed I was. I didn't think it was right, but. They found that they had not much they could do to stop it, but it all went quiet until such time as they submitted the plan to Parish Council for street lighting up. And the original plan, I think, was to build something like 9 houses, and they were only building 2, which was like that for quite a number of years. And in the last 10 years, I suppose, that they put the extra house on this side, but they wanted 16 lights to light those 2, which they are expected the Parish Council to pay for. This happened again in poor old John Barford's year, but we had on the council, we had Chris West, who Chris was, well, I wouldn't say in public what my opinions are. He was a good bloke. He got some very good ideas, Chris was, but he objected most strongly to this, and we all did. And so as a result, they threatened to sue the council. So we then got involved in a local government inquiry, and that was held by the Old Braintree Rural District Council office. And we went over there to it, and John Barfield, myself, and Diz West, who was the clerk at the time, we represented Parish Council. When we got there, Mr. Stedman had employed a barrister and a solicitor, and you know, that was the amateurs and the pros thing.
Oh, yes, of course, yes.
And there was a lot of backward and forward, but all we could do was state our case and talk on common sense about it. And, fortunately, the Act was in our favour, and so it was agreed. The upshot of it was that the lighting should be restricted. And so I think you notice that there have only been a few lights. It's only been recent years that they've now got the full lighting on there. But that was another quite a worrying time, I expect, there, if you reflect back on it, because you know, that was creating a bit of problem. I mean, Mr. Stedman was very friendly with Wilfred Bull, and Wilfred Bull turned up at the Parish Council meeting, and the one thing the Local Government Act stipulated quite strongly, the 33 Act, that you couldn't carry out any weren't electronic were the term, and any recordings of a parish council meeting without permission.
Oh, I see.
So whenever the Grange Hill scheme came up, Wilfred Bull sat there, and somebody twigged them with a tape recorder, little hand tape recorder. They were the infancy, but you know, they got it. So somebody passed a little note up to me at the top table and said, he's got a tape recorder. So I then had to rule him out of order and say, you either switch it off or leave the room. You know, that was the sort of thing was going on. But he used to go back and report to Mr. Stedman about it, and one of the most outspoken people who were there was my uncle Cecil Potter, who feared no man. No. So anyhow, Cecil used to be outspoken, and he didn't choose his words too kindly at times. The result was, I used to be before a meeting, I'd be rung up and said that if that man Potter said anything like that no more, you could tell him he's going to court. So this was what Wilfred Bull was keeping an eye on it for the developer and that sort of thing. But they were the sort of, but if you like, in a way that's a little bit parish pump politics, you know, more like the vicar at Dibley, I suppose, in some respect. Right, but that was one of the things. But it wasn't a comfortable thing to happen, you know. One of the most, I suppose that could be one of the most uncomfortable period. Of course, then to stop Mr. Stedman a little bit in his tracks, that was discovered that he was destroying the access to the ford, which runs the ancient ford, which runs to the right of Stephen's Bridge, and so that went on, and that went right through the mill up to the county council at the one time, and was going further into court when the county council stepped in, and as a result, the ford had to be restored. To this day, the ford will be there now forevermore. Not that we get many horses and cars going, but the ford was restored. You know, that was a most unpleasant time. I mean, I've got nothing against Mr. Stedman. He was looking after his own thing and that. And quite be honest with you, he was very polite, you know, to me personally, and that. But he contested everything.
Yes, in his self-interest.
Yes, all time.
Now,
yes.
This was after you had returned to the council, was it? You were out of the council for 5 years or more?
Yes, I was, yeah.
Had you returned to the council then, when this was going on?
No, this was in the preceding. I was still on the council.
Still on the council?
Actually, my first term.
This is before you got...
Yeah, my first term, yes. I mean, one of the things that we did, that you said, and that was, we looked around and thought that, well, there's not much goes on at Coggersham at the moment. So at that time, Norman Burton was trying to form a little group of actors and a concert party, and so to encourage them, I joined, and I never done any acting, you know, apart from schoolboy stuff. And so the Coggersham Players was formed, and that was a catalyst from it. And another thing that came out of it, that I said other places were having sort of civic societies of some sort. So I proposed that we could form a civic society in Coggersham. And so the parish council, we called the first meeting of what turned out to be the Coggersham Society, which was the founder society of the current Heritage Society. So that was a start we got, you know. And the Coggersham Players, we went on for about 5 to 6 years, and that was another add-on that I had, including my county's duty, including going to night school, including working for a living and bringing up 2 children. we used to go and tread the boards, but we could always fill St Peter's Hall twice, and we used to, all the proceeds were charity, but the main charity that benefited was the football club. Norman Burton used to produce the show, and we used to go on like that. So that was I thought we'd think that was quite helpful in Coggersham. It made something for somewhere for people to go before the television took its toll and that sort of thing. And that was. Did you have anything special for the Queen's coronation at all, as far as the parish? 1953. 1953, oh yes, there was a coronation there. Yeah, yeah. There was a coronation. Yes,
yeah,
yeah. But there was a separate committee did that.
Yes.
The parish council had very little involvement in that. We involved on the periphery. You know, I sat on one of the committees and that was in the early days there. You know.
So now, Stan, after your break away from, away for 5 years, you came back. Did you see many changes in the council?
Yes, I did, because, like I say, the membership had changed somewhat. The vast majority of people were people who were, when I say were new cockers, no disrespect to that, but the old councils, there was people who had been bred and born in Coventry. There wasn't so many of them on. And there was a little bit more progressive attitude to life, and they were doing more, starting to do more and get involved more. But the biggest thing that I found was that it was the way legislation had caught up with the councils, and their hands were being tied more and more by rules and regulations, and the law had been changed.
Where were you meeting at this time now?
We were meeting at that time, when I come on the second hour, we were meeting in the Honeywood School. And that was...
And had you got a full-time clerk, or...?
Oh, no. We had the clerk then was still a part-time clerk, and when I came back, Cass Summers was the first one we had. She was the clerk then, but the clerk still operated from head of their house.
Now, what year was this now?
It'll be about 87, about 88, I suppose, 88 time, and come back. And but the clerk used to still operate from home, and Kath very soon left, and then we had Mrs. Eagle, Lynn Eagle came. There were problems there, but I won't go. I deliberately won't tell that story. And then she left. She resigned after a period of time. Then we had an Integrium till we got another clerk, and then David Warren came along. David Warren was recommended to us by the Essex Local Council Association to come along and help us. In between the two, in the Integrium, I was clerk for the council and doing the clerk's work and the chairman at the same time, because we had to do the lot, and between us I used to dictate the correspondence, Joan used to type it. We got by that way. Then David came along, David Warren, and of course David was with us until he died. David was quite a very, very good clerk, but
very professional, I think.
He's very, very professional, but I think he'd be the first to admit that his strong point wasn't accounts. Well, having been in management for a number of years, and I've done, the company used to send me on courses on account. True, they were management accounts and that, but I could find my way around accounts. Okay, so I used to do the accounts on the computer for David, and David used to do them manually, and between us we used to get them sorted out, and it worked quite well really. And so that was the clerks, but the regulations were then changed yet again, that where we had to sign. We had to, really speaking, that was a sledgehammer to crack a nut bit of legislation, where parish councils were brought under the same rules as, I suppose, almost the House of Commons, where we had to declare an interest, and we had to adopt not a constitution, we had to adopt a control form, and we had to sign a statement of interest. For example, if you owned any property in the parish, you had to declare it, and that sort of thing. We lost a couple of councils over that; they wouldn't declare. There were silly things within it which completely alien to a parish council. Really, there was this declaration of interest. If you held shares in any company which had premises within the parish. You had to declare them. Fortunately, we hadn't any in Coggeshall, but this was quite, they were quite onerous, the clauses, and I think that was the start of the demise of local government, of parish council government, certainly, because that put a lot of people off from standing then, and from then onwards it was a problem to get people to stand to fill the council. I mean, we've seen that this time with this.
Now, had you moved into your office by then?
Oh yes, we'd moved into the office then. Yes, we moved to fire station. Yes, the previous parish council had it done up, and it was empty, and we moved in that at Mrs. Eagle's time, and Derek North was the chair then, and we decided to move into there and establish that as the parish office. It was a building they had spent, I think, £7,000 on getting it done up, and that was just stood empty. So it really utilised the building, and it meant the clerk had a regular place. But the clerk was far from full time. The clerks, parish clerks, as a breed, can never get enough hours, and they're always saying they can't cope within the hours. But at that time, I think we were paying the clerk about something like 18 hours a week for work. When we had
was that stipulated by local government? The number
not necessarily, no. But there is the
what you could afford, I suppose.
No, it's governed by your population, and such things as the number of employees that you have. I mean, for example, we only had one full-time employee, and that was John. Then we took on Dave Honey, and we got 1.5 there, because Dave Honey had part-time. But that did mean that the clerk got another increment in that, and could have their hours extended. I think from memory, and that the present clerk, her hours are about 21 or 22 now, on it. But now, of course, they've now employed an assistant for her, and that's what changed it. So the clerk still had other interests outside the parish and that, but I used to make it a feature, especially when we were down in the office, of meeting at least one day a week and going through all the correspondence and all the business and getting it tidied up. Certainly before every meeting, I would insist that we had a meeting with the clerk and checked all of the business, see what was going to come up, agree what was going to come up, agree what we could do by law, what we couldn't do, and that sort of thing. So you get a briefing, really. That's what I suppose is a term. But
I suppose the clerk had to have some good legal knowledge of all the, enactments.
Well, now there's a series of courses on. The present clerk, for example, has got HNC in local government administration, and of course that's another increment on the pay scale. And she is also doing a part-time course to get a degree in local government administration as well, which is sponsored by the parish council, and that. But I mean, the old clerks, they just had to pick it up and learn on the way back, and a lot depended on the background of the clerk. If you've got a clerk with a legal background, as we had sort of thing with the days up to Norman Burton and that sort of thing, who'd come from Beaumont and Sampson, that was brilliant. They got all the thing there. But now, the local government association, they are the people, you lead back onto them for any sort of legal advice. They are your first line. They help you as much as they can, and then there are certain things you have to go to a solicitor. I mean, in recent years, the biggest thing that we had was the purchase and the renovation of St Peter's Hall.
Yes, I was going to talk about that.
The hall was declared redundant by the county council, and there's a pecking order where they have to offer it first to the district council. Did the district council want to buy it? And then, if not, they asked the parish council if they'd like to buy it. And so we decided, well, if it wasn't bought, the public would be down on it, because there'd be no communal meeting space in Coggeshall. So in the end, we bought it for some 80-odd thousand, using a public work loan board grant over 20 years to purchase it, and we bought that it was a little bit of a millstone at first, and it caused a lot of disruption in the council. They weren't a happy couple of years until we went about and found a fleet. I mean, a plan was put forward, for example, that was going to be so expensive to refurbish. A plan was put forward was to sell the house, sell the building, and use it to the money to develop a hall on the community land that we'd already purchased at the back of the old school building in Stoneham Street. So, but that in the end, it was decided that we'd have a go and go down the road of refurbishment, which we've done most successfully. I mean, the council was congratulated by none other than the chairman of the county council, who proclaimed we've got probably one of the finest village halls in Colchester now.
Yeah, well, it's the climax of your career, I should think, almost.
Well, I mean, the gratitude, the thing of that must be Malcolm Ratcliffe. After all the shenanigans we had, as I said, there was talk about selling it. There was a question of the co-op were interested in buying it to move the co-op there, you know, and we had an investigation to make it into flats and sell them off as flats. But that caused a lot of problems. I was strongly against a change of use. I personally felt that it was a hall. It was bought by public subscriptions in Colchester initially, but I mean, there again, there was problems. Going back over the years, there was change that. I mean, they bought it by public subscription. Then, of course, during the war, it was requisitioned and went back to the Air Ministry had, or the government had it. And when it was de-requisitioned, it was then offered back to the parish for a nominal sum of just over £2,000 odd. It was owned by the church, and people then said that, oh, hold on, we paid for this once by public subscription, we're not going to pay the same money again. So it fell by default then that the county council took it over, and so we lost a hall all those years. We could have had that same argument, incidentally, that we paid for it once was expressed a time or two this time when I was part of the time
for the parish hall.
Yeah, I was part of the time. Yes, yeah, other part. That was during that period that I stood down to chair, and I went for vice chairman for a time, and then I stood down for that for a couple of years while Malcolm Ratcliffe took the chair. Malcolm and Terry Lazelle took the chair, but Malcolm was as you know, a very hard working chap.
Yes.
He really got the together. He was very experienced at it in military training and the work he was doing with the military. That sort of gave him a lot of experience. He's responsible for refurbishing barracks and things like that. So that was right up his street. But he gave excellent leadership, and we didn't always agree with it, but we went ahead with it, and he's done a wonderful job. He put his heart and soul.
Now, of course, you're all also one of the founder members of the museum, weren't you? Was the parish anything to do with that at all?
No, not at all, no. In fact, in some respects, a little bit hostile, I suppose. I mean, the start of that, I had a message from Jeff Carter at the community school. Could I go and have a word with him? And I'd been involved with his exhibitions of cultural history all over the place. We were like a strolling band where anybody give us a hall or loan us a hall, we'd put an exhibition up once a year or so. And but then the school kitchens came redundant down there in the hall, and Jeff Carter sent for me, and he said, how would you like to use the whole school kitchens as a museum? So we gave it thought, and I said yes, we'll have a go, and we got some of it together. I mean, good old dear old Brian Tebbett was in right from the end, and Brian was a tower of strength in everything he did, tremendous energy, tremendous enthusiasm, and that's how we got the museum going, you know. But there was no help whatsoever from anybody on that, certainly not the parish council, and I didn't use my position on the parish council anyhow to promote the museum.
You'd have to declare it anyway.
We'd have to declare an interest. That is, you have to declare. I mean, I talked earlier on about how things had changed and the constraints you put on them. I mean, it got so ridiculous in the end that you had to declare for the smallest things. You had to declare and put them in the book. and the book should have been inspected annually by the.
Did they have inspectors come to the parish council office?
No. The only people who come are the auditors.
Oh yes.
The auditors, they keep a very much stiff control on it now, and they look after everything, and they really, the auditors, they monitor your performance against the law, and you have to show to them what it is. I mean, now that's changed. It's put out. We used to have the government used to audit it, but now they put it out to an agency, and so there's an agency auditors now, and so and the council must appoint an internal auditor now, which we did. When that first came out, we had a problem getting an auditor, so I actually audited the books as internal auditor for a year until we were able to appoint somebody. We've got a very good auditor now, wonderful man. He does very modest fees, and he's got local government experience, and he's really good. And with old David Warren, when David was the clerk, we used to take pride in getting our books through without a query from the auditor, and beating some of the other councils. I mean, you hear of councils which have got waiting audit clearance for about 2 to 3 years about that. But in recent years, we've always got our books through at the first attempt. We've not too many queries. Cause if there's a query raised by the auditor now, the parish has to pay for it, and there's a scale of fees that you have to pay. So the thing is to get it right, and get it right first time. And David Warren introduced that discipline into it, and between us, it's very much a team effort.
Yes.
We used to get an early certificate and that.
It seems to me that parish, the parish council now is very restricted. I mean, it seems to be a lot of controls on it now.
Oh, there is a certain amount. There is an element. For example, there's a section 137. You can spend. I think it changed in recent years, but from memory, it's something like a threepenny rate. Or you can spend that on anything that doesn't conform with the local government, which are not government. So it used to always be called the free spend. It used to be tuppence when I always started, an old 2 tuppence, old coin, and that. But that's the free spend. That gives the parish council to do a little bit on social things. I mean, you could help support an organisation, for example, but within the close limits of that. Of course, another thing that the parish council here has got, which is quite unique, is that we've got the market. Now, the parish council are every council is automatically a trustee on the market, and we're trustees only. I mean, the thing is that when you finish the parish council meeting, you adjourn that meeting, and then you reconvene as market trustees, and you operate the market. Now, the market account, many revenue raised from that, is not included in the parish council spend. You have a certain amount of latitude about that spend. There's very strict rules on how that money can be spent, but it is used to cover things which help the rates, I suppose, to some extent. For example, every year there's £400 given to the Christmas tree.
Oh, I see.
And the lights, and that's a grant for that, which you can make. Otherwise, that would come out of your free spend, and £400 is a big chunk of it, you see.
If you buy some bananas from the store, do you have to declare it?
No, not at all, no. But every year about August, you are approached by the Lord of the Manor for his take. He has a percentage of the market take, the market account each year.
Who is it? Who is it?
It was Mr. Bonner the last time I heard, but I think he died. I think his son in America took it over. But regularly on the nail, either Mr. Bonner when he was active or Mrs. Bonner would be at the gate of the parish council office. Is it time for the cheque yet, please? And so that would be worked out. But that's paid after all expenses are taken out. Well, when we say all expenses are taken out, that's a proportion for the clerk and that sort of thing. And we give a small honorarium to the workers, John and David, for the extra work that the market imposes on them for clearing up and that sort of thing. So that all those overheads are taken out of the market take, and he gets a percentage on that. I mean, I have known it to be up to about £140, but I think the last time it's something that I remember about £40 and it's gone down, you know.
So now that you're retired, I suppose you can walk around the town and see things that you've been involved in, can you? Or?
Oh yes, you can look back. I mean, all that's been achieved has been a team effort, but you can look back and see where you were the catalyst in them.
Yes.
One of the funny things that I miss from being on the council is that we built up a very good relationship with officials at the district and the highway and the county council.
Yes.
So you've got a name and a face at the end of the telephone.
Yes, right.
And over the years, you got to be as friends, and you could talk things over in an unofficial way.
Yes.
They weren't officials. They were officials, but you could chat things
That's
out,
right.
and you got things done.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, I used to have one official. I won't mention his name. I won't embarrass him, but he gave me his phone. He said, "Don't come through the exchange. Come right to my desk." You know, and they're little things. If I saw something that wanted doing, I didn't wait to take it to a parish council meeting. I mean, if you had a hole in the road, some poor humbug can fall over it, and you don't wait another 4 weeks till the next council comes.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So I'd pick it up and just say, "Can you get one of your blokes to have a look at this?" And leave it with me. And within 2 or 3 days, it was done.
Yes, that's right.
And and it's the same with the clean team at Braintree District Council. I wouldn't wait to, if it lit up and that, I mean, no tourist spots outside the school, and you'd ring up the clean team and that, so StanleyHaines here, can you do anything about that? Leave it with us, we'll have a look at it, and you got it done. But towards the end, you know, or now, you can't do that.
No,
You've lost all that contact.
No.
You have to go through the official channels. You know, you have to ring the parish council office up and take potluck with the clerk or do anything about it.
There's a lot more bureaucracy.
The bureaucracy, you see,
Yes,
but it took a long time to to build up these relationships.
Oh, yes.
And when these people used to retire or move on, they used to bring their successor over to introduce you, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
And I mean, it's like the roads. We had a regular feature with the roads, that every year we'd have a complete survey of every road and pavement in the town, make a note of where we thought something was wrong, where the surface wasn't so good, you know. Then we'd have a meeting with the highway. There used to be about 3 or 4 of them to come over, and we'd sit and talk it out and say, what can you do here, you know. Oh, I don't know about this year's budget, but if I've got a little bit left over the end of the year, I'll do it. Oh, I can get somebody on that tomorrow, you know. I mean, a thing comes to mind, the White Lines and the Market Hill, what a painting, and they were completely oblivious, and people were going both sides of the thing. That was a problem. So I put this on the agenda at that meeting, and I told them what it was. So they said, we can see where you're coming from now, leave it with us. The next day, there was somebody over there painting the lines. Well, that's moving it forward, but you wouldn't get that, you know, with letter writing, it's not the same. You've got to wait, it's got to go through departmentals and that sort of thing, but with that, and I do miss that. That's one of the biggest things I do miss about it, you know. And I mean, people still ring up about things that's typical of the lethargic attitude to the parish council, that people think you're still on it, you know. I mean, I had one man come to the door and started roaring and ranting and roaring at me, and so I let him have his say, and I said, well, just one thing, I said, I'm not a councillor any longer. Oh, I am so sorry, I didn't know that, did I? And away he went, but this is how it happens. But it's been a big part of my life, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. Let me say that. I don't begrudge a minute that I spent on parish council affairs. I've enjoyed it. I've met some nice people. We worked with some nice people, and you know, that's been. I'm a born administrator, and that just fits into me straight away, and that sort of thing.
Oh well, Thank you for all your many years of loyal service, Stan.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.